someday this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The newest show sensation streaming throughout the multiverse. Your hang place in cyberspace for paranormal news and views. Taboo Topics with Gene Broida.
Welcome, everyone, to Taboo Topics with Gene Broida. I'm your host, Gene Broida, also known as Lightworker 111, beaming to you sea from shining sea across the Americas and the world every Sunday night between 7 and 9 o'clock Eastern Time in the United States on my Taboo Topics YouTube channel at tabootopics.life/shows. And tonight, broadcast live on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. Panelists on this show, Taboo Topics with Gene Broida, share news articles about paranormal events, conspiracies, and other hush-hush subjects that we all explore and probe further before moving on to the next taboo topic. On today's show, I'm thrilled to have an excellent set of guest panelists. Please welcome Walt Christos, Iroquois shaman, metaphysician, journalist, and author, and also Ian Hack, paranormal researcher and master presenter. Walt, please take a few moments. Introduce yourself to everyone in our worldwide audience.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here. I've been known in the paranormal world as a psychic and a shaman. I, as a traditional shaman, influence weather, and it's the use of allies, which, in my view, has perhaps included some ET. Now, I took James Randi's challenge, and he gave me 33 requests for weather. He picked the days, he picked the weather, and he picked the place. We had it monitored by media, and I got 27 of his 33 requests. But that was just 33 days out of a long life. I'm perhaps most known because I did a metaphysics forum online called A Forum with No Name, which had 6,000 direct members and then was forwarded. And that got me known in the paranormal metaphysical community. And my current project is making books of those issues.
That's awesome. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
Well, hi, everybody. My name's Ian Hack. Paranormal researcher, like she said, truth seeker. Not much in the psychic realm yet or anything metaphysical as far as my own abilities, but we'll see how that goes in the future. I've been involved in the paranormal probably since 2010 or so, I'd say. So about 10 years, mostly due to meeting my wife, the lovely Corey. I had some spirit encounters with spirit first, and then I saw a UFO craft, and I've been going down the rabbit hole ever since, trying to find what the truth is. And just researching and learning kind of people and experience. And I know one day we'll all get there. I'm a big believer in the ascension process that Laura Eisenhower and some others talk about. And I think humanity is in for some very good things in the future. We just got to clear the webs away.
Thanks, Ian. I have to say, I think we're getting a little bit of distortion out of your setup there, and I don't know that you can do anything about it, but just be aware of that. There seems to be some electronic feedback or something going on. I'm not quite sure what. In any event, welcome to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. I am your host, Jean Broida, a lifelong UFO researcher, parapsychologist, and author of the book Unknown Objects, the Top 10 US UFO Cases. The 10 cases in my book, from the Foo Fighters of World War II up through the Phoenix Lights of 1997, will help you understand why you must be crazy not to believe in UFOs and their alien occupants. I'm an avid news hound with degrees in computer science, psychology, and education, and I'm also a practicing mystic specializing in tarot and astrology. What I'm seeing, what a lot of us are seeing, is that a growing number of truth seekers and starseeds are waking up in consciousness to question the emotional impact that sweeping official cover-ups have had over 7 decades on our society. We are certainly living in remarkable times as light workers are awakening to universal truths in numbers never before seen on Earth. And all of us here today hope you'll enjoy today's show as we shed light in the dark corners of reality as we know it. Now let's begin talking about taboo topics. And I am thrilled to lead us off with a juicy news article that I wrote. It was one of the first articles that I wrote for thedailyconspiracy.com. I'm a regular contributor as Lightworker 111. This was published on September 28th, 2017. It's titled UFO Abductions, Fact or Fiction? Dr. Roger K. Lear, the alien implant doctor. This is, I'm reading this to you with kind permission from thedailyconspiracy.com. Thank you so much. So here we go. Where's the physical evidence? That's perhaps the most popular question asked by opponents of the theory, not to mention firsthand reports that ETs fly their UFOs around the planet, abducting cows and people willy-nilly, upon whom they perform medical exams and sometimes painful procedures. Think probe. In fact, there's plenty of physical evidence, and here's some. You be the judge. Dr. Roger K. Lear, the American that's a hard word. Podiatric, he's a foot doctor, known as the alien implant doctor, is best known for performing 16 surgeries. And in those 16 surgeries, he removed 17 alien implants during his 40-year career. He challenged the conventional scientific community by showing physical evidence, the objects he removed, as proof of extraterrestrial intervention right here on good old Earth. An avid ufologist from boyhood, Dr. Lear became the state section director of MUFON, Ventura, Santa Barbara, California. And as an aside, for those of you who don't know, MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network, a nationwide reporting agency. From Lear's association with that group, 2 people from different parts of Texas brought him x-rays of foreign objects embedded in their bodies, unaccountable by prior surgeries, injuries, or splinters. First case, Pat Peranello, 47 years old, had an object embedded in the back of his left hand. Second case, Mary Jones, not her real name, 52 years old, had 2 objects in her big in her left big toe. On August 19th, 1995, Dr. Lear and his surgical team removed these objects, and finding them curious, dare I say unearthly, the foot doctoring ufologist had 2 pathologists and several independent laboratories test and analyze the evidence. Even as the first 3 implants were being studied, 2 more women from different parts of California, Dorothy O'Hara, 61 years old, and Alice Levy, 40 years old, underwent surgeries on May 18th, 1996, where Dr. Lear removed objects similar to the first. And then in January 1997, another foot surgery produced an object described as crystalline from a 4th woman, this 37-year-old Licia Davidson. The first set of implanted objects tested positive for being metallic, but the second set of implanted objects did not. If these objects are, in fact, alien tracking or monitoring devices, could different objects perform different functions? Of the 17 implants, Dr. Lear said in a video interview that 7, quote, look exactly the same. I've synthetically divided them into 3 categories: ones that are metallic and covered with biological coating, ones that are non-metallic, and one that is biological. Each operates a little differently. Are there biologist ETs out there tagging us like wild animals that we research? Notable among all these cases was the absence of any memory, physical rash, scar, insertion point, or fever from these objects, raising the question, what kind of technology or happenstance can explain how this object came to be inside my foot when I never had any surgeries in my life? Quoting Dr. Roger Lear in a December 4th, 2009 televised interview, he said, quote, how do you get something into the human body and not have the body react to it? You either have an inflammatory reaction or it's a full-blown inflammatory reaction we call a rejection reaction. You don't just get foreign material into the body and have the body sit there and smile at it, unquote. On May 30th, 1978, Tim Cullen and his wife Janet were driving in Colorado. They stopped their car to get out and look at a UFO. When they got home, they realized they had lost an hour of time. Years later, an X-ray revealed an unexplained piece of metal in Tim's arm. He sent his X-ray to Dr. Lear, who filmed the extraction surgery of a 6-millimeter metallic object with many attached nerve cells that didn't seem to belong there. Again, the patient said there had been no skin reaction or inflammation to mark the object's original insertion. Dr. Roger Lear said on an episode of Penn and Teller's BS, titled Alien Abductions, quote, it is my opinion that someone or some entity from somewhere else is implanting these devices into human beings so that they can monitor genetic changes which are occurring in the human body, unquote. Dr. Lear founded a not-for-profit organization called Alien Scalpel, A&S Research, Inc., to study bio and psych aspects of alien abduction. And the company's website reports, quote, these objects have been scientifically investigated by some of the most prestigious laboratories in the world, including Los Alamos National Labs, New Mexico Tech, SEAL Laboratories, Southwest Labs, the University of Toronto, York University, and the University of California at San Diego. Their findings have been baffling. Some of the tests show metallurgical anomalies, such as highly magnetic iron that is without crystalline form, combinations of crystalline materials mixed with common metals, growth of biological tissue into or out of metallic substances, as well as isotopic ratios not of this world, unquote. After surviving severe cases of shingles and diabetes, at the 2012 International UFO Conference, Dr. Lear said, quote, "Although I went through a terrible time health-wise, for some reason I'm still hanging around. And one of the reasons I'm hanging around is to wait for disclosure to come," unquote. The following year, in 2013, he testified as a medical witness at the Citizens Hearing for Disclosure for the existence of ETs and UFOs. Critics and debunkers claimed that Dr. Roger Lear was seeking fortune and fame, that the objects removed surgically are not especially unusual, that the laboratories used for testing are not reputable, and that Dr. Lear refused to surrender his implants to naysayers for them to test. No one can argue that Dr. Lear achieved a fair degree of fame, particularly in the field of ufology. He wrote a couple of books, The Aliens and the Scalpel in 1999, and Casebook, Alien Implants in 2000, describing his groundbreaking surgeries and his conclusions that these objects were of non-earthly origin. Then in 2005, UFO Crash in Brazil, another book, reported the results of his investigation in basically Virginia, Brazil, I can't say that in Spanish, into the Brazilian Roswell event of 1996, which featured multiple witnesses and military documentation. Dr. Lear appeared in several televised documentaries, including the History Channel's UFO Hunters, and was a frequent guest on ufology podcast talk shows. He lectured in 42 countries and was invited to present at the prestigious Society for Scientific Exploration in Paris, France. He also looked into the 2007 to 2009 UFO sightings reported from Kumburgaz, Turkey. The groundbreaking UFO researcher and investigator, Dr. Roger K. Lear, died Friday, March 14th, 2014, never experiencing the full disclosure for which he hung around. Returning to his critical question posed, the critical question I posed at the beginning of this article, given this and other well-documented cases of ET and UFO activities, the question being kicked around on Ufology Street is, what will it take to get full ET and UFO disclosure? And that's what I put to you, the panelists. I've covered a lot of ground here, but basically just to recap, and for viewers new to the show, welcome to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, broadcast on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern in the United States. Just finished talking about Dr. Roger Lear, the alien implant doctor who removed 17 implants in 16 surgeries, claiming all the while that these were of extraterrestrial origin, and as did the people from whom these were extracted. They had missing time. They had other classic aspects of UFO abduction cases. What do you guys make of that? Chime in.
Well, I recall an episode from Babylon 5, a fictional TV series set in a potential human future. And they had a court. And in their court, there were humans who came to sue ET for past and present interactions with humans. Now, to my knowledge, I've never been implanted, except for perhaps one time when I and two of my coworkers developed something solid that appeared in our necks without any visible scar or way for it to have gotten there. But it could be felt. And it was about yay big. And so a couple of inches, 2 to 3 inches. And it was maybe a quarter of an inch to a half inch in width, and it felt like a cylinder, rounded. And none of us, we naturally assumed a medical condition. And these objects vanish from all of us maybe 3 days to a week later. Right? Other than that, I have not been implanted, and I don't know anyone that has. I don't dispute the possible existence of many ETs with many different agendas. And I know that there can be good and bad in all. I don't believe that involuntary use of humans is right in any way, shape, or form. That there are ways that they could peacefully, openly study us, except who knows what their relations are with our government and what questions of jurisdiction come into play, both in their reality and in ours. And also, you were stumbling with that Virginia in Brazil. And as someone who lives in Virginia in the US, I can tell you as a joke, there's no R in Virginia. All right, back to you. That's just some quick feedback from me.
So,
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
so I have several things to say about this. First of all, I'm gonna go really metaphysical here to start with. As far as permission, who's to say, and this has been talked about and bandied about, I know, a lot in our circles, who's to say that you don't have some kind of soul contract with the said beings that basically you agreed to have an implant in you? That's been, I know that's been talked about a lot.
That's a good point. I've never heard before. Pardon the interruption, but yeah, go ahead.
Really? Okay. So something new then. Okay.
I've heard it suggested, but I would still disagree.
I've heard
you should have a voluntary consent.
I've heard of soul contracts, but I've never heard them in the context of it's okay for you to abduct me and wipe my memory and harvest my sperm or my ova.
Oh yeah.
It's not beyond the realm of possibility, though. Certainly.
Yeah. That's one thing. The other thing is, it's one thing for the doctor and the patients to have this thing in them and then to get it removed, and the doctor says, look at this. It's quite another with the follow-up. And what I mean by that is what I've heard about, or read about at least, is sometimes, as with everything else involving our friends from out there, here comes the government. Oh, you have this little thing, let me see it. Oh, no, now you never hear or see about it ever again. And so how often does that happen where you have clandestine black operations or whatever else getting involved with this, and they, you know, Men in Black, what have you, they come and grab it, try to sweep it under the rug, and then even though we keep talking about maybe in paranormal circles, the rest of the world is like, that person was just nuts. That's another thing to consider too.
Yeah.
Did
So
you
I've
ever
seen
do a follow-up, Gene, on this article?
well,
See what happened to the implants after he died.
I have tried to, what I was going to say was I have seen video of parts of some of the surgeries that Lear posted.
Mhm.
And what's weird about these little objects is that they seem to evade extraction. Now, they might, in other words, he puts in the little forceps or tweezers or whatever he's using to extract this thing surgically, and it's like it's moving away under the skin. Now, magnetism can repel, under certain circumstances, and maybe these things are designed to,
You can have nano.
or maybe they're just magnetic. You know, I mean, he was using a ferrous tool and.
Their technology too.
But he seemed to think, at least during the videotaping or recording, he seemed to think these things were trying to get away and fleeing, basically, and that they had intelligence or some way to sense.
Yeah, that's what I said, technology.
Yeah.
Nano. I mean, look at our insects. Take a fly. and it has, 58 eyes. And it, just think of the biological mini circuitry in that teeny creature, or even the brain of a gnat. So once you start microing things, making everything smaller and smaller, then you can begin to at least conceptualize what some advanced technology might do. Plus, there's remote. There's those contact lenses now that record and transmit, and they are the same size as a normal contact lens. You can buy them online. You can record it yourself, or it can be transmitted to another receiver. The same possibility could be for these devices. That would, at least, if that device was transmitting, there could be an intelligence behind it that's not resident within it.
Yes, exactly. Like remote control is kind of what you mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the other odd thing about implants, and not necessarily just Weir's implants, but other people who have said they have implants, they seem to run in the family. That if one person in a family has them, other people are likelier to have them. And that one excrement, we're having fun theorizing as to what these things are for. Are they for tracking? Are they for identification? Are they for biomonitoring? We just don't know. We don't know. But we know that they are there. And did extraterrestrials put them there, or government agencies put them there, or?
It's the many possibilities. Never limit yourself to one answer. There are pictures of implants online. I don't think they're this doctor's, but there are some, all right? And then there are also the small chips that we're developing ourselves. So there's a lot of stuff out there. When Ian first said follow-ups, all right, and then he mentioned the government coming in, my first thought was follow-up visits from the ETs, because generally they might want to upgrade or retrieve, or most people that have UFO or ET contact experiences have many. I have had many. And that seems to me to be the norm. So when he said follow-ups, I was thinking, first of all, that it's ET that does follow-ups.
That's certainly true. I wasn't trying to say it was just the government. Certainly, over somebody's third dimensional lifespan in their current body, trying to get everything in there. If they have that kind of contact and they have implants and the ETs are monitoring them for whatever else, certainly they probably get follow-up abductions and visits due to, just as you said, upgrade or additional implants, change implants, what have you. I definitely could see that happening.
And again, there are many of them. So they're not necessarily working together. They can be working across purposes in the same way that there are many nations of humans, and that no single group of humans represents us all. The same can be true even within a type of ET. So I just think there's a lot going on.
And the other creepy thing about these implants, by the way, was that they were obviously artificially constructed, or, well, maybe that wasn't obvious, but they were not biological, not completely biological, most of them. And the non-biological part had integrated with the host, the human host's biology, so that they are not only implanted, but neurons and little connecting tissues have grown into the things, making it even harder to extract.
That's what I was going to say something about that. I know some of the implants that have been removed, they've found some of the host tissue or cells or what have you, even embedded and kind of becoming part of the implant itself after they remove them. They're like, how is this even possible? So I know
cyborg. We're becoming able to do that ourselves, or at least we are getting to the point where we are admitting that we are able to do it. I tend to believe that what is admitted is about 20 to 30 years behind the actual. That what is released to us is what has been developed and is able to be managed.
I think that 20 estimate is actually way short. I think it's a lot more. If you've seen some of the David Wilcock films that have come out involving the secret space program, it's possible that the tech they have is hundreds of years ahead of what we think is really, or what the general public thinks is available.
That's possible.
You mean our own government?
Our own government.
The tech our own government has?
Our own government and the offshoots that have come from the government, the black projects, even private companies, and dare I say, even surviving Nazis.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Totally on board. Totally on board with all that. Say again?
I was going to say, have you ever seen the Iron Sky movies? I mean, that's where they take every conspiracy theory that has ever been and throw it into one movie. They're excellent in a light, comedic, satire way.
I am not familiar with those, but it sounds like it's worth checking out for sure.
There are. There's two.
I do like me some comedy and satire.
You would love it. There's two of them, and they're going to make a third.
There has been a lot of talk about implanting in humans for work, at work now. So the evolution of these alien implants into human society, whether humans got the idea from alien implants or not, because I'm a skeptic, I'm not totally convinced that these are implants of extraterrestrial origin, although I have to tell you some of the proof seems pretty compelling that that's the case. But in terms of taboo topics, one thing that is taboo is criticizing companies, governments that want to chip everything that has a pulse, basically, to track and monitor. And this is being sold to consumers and employees as to our advantage. How easy it is to get a chip in your hand when you go to work. Instead of your badge, you have to wear around your neck, and you leave in your car, and then you get dinged. It's always there. It's always there. How convenient. It's always there, and it never turns off, basically. It's always radiating in your body. I cannot recommend anybody implant a radio transmitter inside their body. That's just not how I roll.
You probably carry one with a cell phone.
Yes, but I can put that down.
Do you?
And I do, and I move it away. I move it as far away from possible. And when I use it, I use the speakerphone, which probably helps a little bit.
I used to laugh that the government liked to keep track of me for various reasons, right? And sometime during one of my dog's visits to a vet, her ear got chipped. I didn't ask for a chip, but I can feel it. There's something in her ear, and I say it's a chip, but I joke that that's how they can keep track of me.
Well, if the vet did it, it's probably, at least on the surface, to track your pet, right? If your pet went missing.
I don't know where it came from, but normally,
you would think they would have told you about it, right?
Before and charged me for it or something, And I didn't think they did this for free. Anyway, but there is something in her ear, and maybe it didn't come from a vet. I don't know where it came from. Again, no visible scar. All right, same as with the that's an interesting thing about the alien implants also, in that they generally do not leave a visible scar. So they're getting inserted or resealed in a way that also indicates advanced technology. But
That's
I go
right.
along
I had
with
forgotten
ancient
about
aliens.
that, but I'm glad you brought that up. Very true.
I go along with ancient aliens and the ETs. And I think that they never left. And I think that some bloodlines are trying to breed back. And I think people are people as individuals, and that we should all embrace our humanity as one. But I don't know how likely that is. It's going to be another one of those issues that you can become hateful and divisive about. In the Dune by Frank Herbert series of reality, first there were humans, then there were cyborgs, which were humans and machine with machine components, up to the point where it was a total machine but with a human brain, right? Starting from just all human with one little mechanical tech, right? And evolved to also artificial intelligences that were independent in the cyborg and then independent as holograms. And there came a great war, a three-way war, genocidal, between all three of these. And in that process, Earth was destroyed, and eventually the survivors of humanity finally overcame the artificial intelligences. And that's when they went for breeding. And they would breed types of humans to suit their needs, some with psychic abilities, some with great intelligence, some as warriors or with physical traits. And that's why in the Dune series, there is no technology. Everything is done by what people can do as living things. They would allow no machine to be made that was in any way self-aware.
Well, of course, in more modern times and in reality, microchips were developed, at least so the story goes, by for the racehorse industry by a technologist who was, as far as I can tell, straight up, straightforward, not New World Orderian type person, not that kind of person, but he honestly wanted to solve a problem, which was substituting racehorses. You get a lookalike racehorse that has the same markings as the racehorse. The racehorse that's supposed to be in the race, for whatever reason, can't race or won't race well. It's sick, injured. And so you put in the substitute to stop this kind of fraud at the racetrack. This guy an engineer developed this chip that could be inserted with a hypodermic needle subdermally into a racehorse to positively identify it. And that's what has evolved into pet tracking and even child tracking, putting these into your children to follow them so that you can follow them remotely. And that has actually led to at least one lawsuit that I know of where the child grew up and became the age of majority, 18 or 21 years old, whichever it was in that state, and sued the parents for putting a chip in, because once they're in, they can be very hard to remove because the body wants to integrate them and grows around them.
I don't like the idea of most metals in my body anyway. I don't. It's potentially unhealthy.
Ian, do you run into people with implants? And I know you and your wife, Corey, meet all kinds of metaphysical people and experiencers.
Yeah, we do. In fact, Corey has a couple, probably, she thinks she does, and a couple of people, Margie Kay and some other people think she does as well. And so we, at the conferences we go to and circles we keep, couple. I mean, it's definitely a phenomenon. And I was going to say, this thing about chipping everybody, I think a lot of people either didn't read or forgot what they read in 1984. I am so sick and tired of this tracking, of this, convenience for security baloney. I'm sorry, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it all. Leave us alone. How about that? That'd be great. Just leave us alone. Let us live our lives. Let us gain our knowledge and just leave us alone. You don't need to track us. I don't want some Google device in my home listening to me all the time. I don't need some chip in my body. Just leave me alone.
Well said, sir. And I write articles about the erosion of privacy in the United States. And what's more concerning even is apathy about that erosion of privacy. Many, many people really just don't care that there's no privacy anymore. And there was an interesting article I read by somebody else about how cultural perceptions of privacy change and shift. Well, that stands to reason. The notions of privacy in Japan and Mexico, for example, are very different from those in the United States. Well, fine. But what we're talking about is a federal agency copying all of our communications all the time and storing them should someone become a person of interest at a future date. This is Orwellian. This is draconian. This is totalitarian, and nobody seems to care. And that's what astonishes me.
It's in the state we trust.
True that.
For public health, public safety, these things have priority, as does national security. Now, I am totally pro individual rights and individual free will, but today's youth easily take stuff for granted, and they don't know what they have already lost. And they have to be the ones to maintain their own right at some point. And the erosion is small, but steady. And it's gone more into conspiracy theory than into ET abduction. But I have concerns that the people are going to be viewed as assets that belong to the state. We are part of a greater society.
It seems like that's already happening.
Yeah, it's going to
Italy just mandated vaccines.
Say again, Ian?
You think it's in the future? I think it's already happening now.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for weighing in on that. These alien implants are a thing, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing more of those. Let's move on to another taboo topic. And speaking of which, in case you just tuned in, this is Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, being broadcast live on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. And we broadcast every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. You can find the show at my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Please subscribe. And you can go to my website, www.tabootopics.life with an F /shows. Let's move on to another taboo topic with Ian Hack. What have you got for us tonight here?
Oh, I've got a wonderful book. I'll hold it up. Everyone can see it, I hope. The title is Inside the Real Area 51, The Secret History of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So I'm going to read a passage from this. I've got one picked out here. Shh. Daisy. Sorry, my dog. Let's see here. I'm going to find the passage. Give me one moment. Okay.
Well, we all want to know what kind of dog you have.
Oh, she's a mix of Beagle and Australian Shepherd.
Aww.
Yep, okay. This one.
This is why I use Post-its.
Okay, here we go.
The little arrows.
All right, okay. Here we go. Introduction. I'll read the introduction here. I don't want to give the whole book away after all. Psychologist Dr. Thomas Glovich has succinctly defined our objective in writing the book you are about to read. He portrays the condition known as healthy skepticism this way, quote, an awareness of how and when to question and recognition of what it takes to truly know something are among the most important elements of what constitutes an educated person, end quote. With that supposition, the authors of this tome question the official version of what we will demonstrate to be the biggest secret in the history of this country. Within the past 20 years, the Roswell incident has become an international household phrase, synonymous with cover-ups and government deception. The true nature of what actually crashed in New Mexico in 1947 remains classified, even above the Oval Office, as evidenced by the failed disclosure efforts of Presidents Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton. And earth-shaking as that event was to humankind, only a select few has ever had access to the whole truth. Initially, the media was essentially banned from reporting all UFO research and would contradict the more mundane official explanations. Surely a blow to the egos of journalists seasoned from their coverage of World War II. Moreover, to preempt any future curiosity about the true nature of UFO events, the press has been systematically indoctrinated in outright dismissal of the subject. Divisiveness and debunking of such tales became the rule of the day, and public deception has risen to an astronomical level. Never in the course of American history have elected officials tasted more cynicism and rejection from the doubting Thomases of society, whose efforts planted the seeds of supposition. Yet the story is too big, too important to relegate to the cold abandoned warehouse of forgotten history. Gene, you're going to like this. President John F. Kennedy had this to say about such secrets. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and materialistic resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly effective machine that combines military and diplomatic intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. As investigative authors, we are confident that we have provided circumstantial evidence sufficient for victory in any courtroom. Evidence that a craft and crew of unknown origin crashed outside of Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. It is this premise from which we will work throughout this book, probing the depths of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the real Area 51. Among the many questions we ask is this: if an event of such significance as this, the crash of an extraterrestrial craft, took place, what should we expect from the government and those placed in charge of the aftermath? How would they react? History has documented the very specific actions on the part of officialdom that clearly suggest they were responding to an event of an extraordinary nature. For example, the Roswell incident did not just fade into the background with the explanation of a mere weather balloon device. To the contrary, the military's actions gave every indication that something far beyond their control had taken place. What transpired in the shadows after all the physical evidence was retrieved and transferred up the intelligence channel left our government totally in the dark. For one brief moment on July 8, 1947, the public's worldview was fully altered with the Army's announcement. RAAF, Roswell Army Airfield, captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. Within the next 5 hours, the sustained balloon explanation provided reprieve, but not for those assigned to defend and protect us. To them, the world would never be the same. From their perspective, our sovereign shores had just been obliterated. Eyes were fixated on the skies. That which was once relegated to the domain of science fiction was now a reality as stark as death itself. And just as with death, no living creature on planet Earth knew what was on the other side. As the chapters unfold, you, the reader, will see countless attempts by our leaders and our military to wrestle with not only the notion of being threatened by a power beyond our own, but also the complete impotence they felt when dealing with such a phenomenon. What began in the most remote desert region of New Mexico continued at the ultra top secret military facility named Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Truly, it was only the end of the beginning. The futile attempts at reverse engineering, the dissection of biological remains, all would find this top secret facility as deep and black as space itself. Our visitors from the start were swallowed in the underground warehouse known as Wright-Pat. If the National Museum of American History is America's attic, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is definitely its basement. It was there, with all the accumulated physical proof and documentation that we were being observed from outside our planet, that this nuclear-equipped United States Air Force stronghold earned a stellar reputation for secrets going in but seldom coming out. How tragic that the needs of the few have decided for all of humankind that such seismic news should be kept from us forever. Pieces of history now quickly dwindling into oblivion as the last of the secret keepers pass away. In spite of its rich and historic military service to our nation, Wright-Patterson stands as a tombstone over one of the greatest discoveries in all of recorded history. For more than 30 years, it was ground zero in the government cover-up of UFOs. Be prepared. The UFO vault is about to be opened. And that's just the introduction. I would strongly suggest getting this book. It's on Amazon. You can find it other places. We ended up getting it at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference a couple of years ago. But this is a hell of a read. A lot of people just don't understand what probably happened after the crash. There's been a lot of research into it, but everyone thinks, oh, it went here, it went there. Wright-Patterson was the epicenter of what happened with all that, as far as where they sent everything, where it was studied and everything else. And the reason for that is that Wright-Patterson was set up to be the place where any captured aircraft in World War II, and after that with the Soviet Union, any captured technology would be sent there to be studied so they could reverse engineer it, so they could study it, so they could figure out, okay, our enemies have this, so how do we counter what they have with this? I mean, it's been a top, and then, so it stands to reason if you're going to have a UFO craft that from visitors from another planet or somewhere else, that would be the place you would send it at that time. And that's exactly what they purport to have happened. And of course, everyone who knows about Wright-Patterson knows about the famous Hangar 18 as well, which is supposedly where all this took place, which wasn't a hangar at all. So what do you guys have to say about this?
Well, I'm going to jump in here because at the time of Roswell, 1947, there may well not have been an Area 51. And so for the author, is a single author or more than one?
It's two. It's Thomas Carey and Donald Schmidt.
Okay, so Carey and Schmidt, I'm sure, have done their homework and are dedicated researchers. And I'm not going to challenge their statement that Wright-Patterson was Area 51, but I don't think it is the same facility that Bill Cooper, for example, talked about and that other people have talked about south of Las Vegas. But we do know that Wright-Patterson indeed was involved in receiving retrieved objects and probably bodies from Roswell. And was it one UFO, two UFOs? How many UFOs actually crashed there? There's been so much obfuscation of the real truth. It's hard to know if we'll ever know for sure. But what do you think, Walt?
I was going to recommend Philip Corso, Corso. And he was an officer who claimed to have handled some of the Roswell debris and then funneled it out to U.S. corporations to see if they could reverse engineer technology. Another thing I would recommend is an old TV series called Dark Skies. And it starts with Roswell and unveils events that occurred secretly to deal with the concrete knowledge that we had to face ET. My I've come from a military family, and among them was outright skepticism that ETs could even exist. But I was able to show them UFOs, 2 of them at any rate. And it's always been comforting to me when I have a witness, so that I know that it's not something that's just in my own mind. Right? I think this could dip way into taboo topics, and that we use babble. And instead of concealing the truth, we speak it. But we speak 100 other possibilities, so that the truth, though it is out there, is among all these other things. And I think that eventually there will be an ET official ceremony of some sort. And, you know, I've wondered with the corona stuff, as long as we're cleaning all the streets and sidewalks, if we are disinfecting our world to make it safe. And I wouldn't be surprised if ET appeared to help us with it. But if they don't, it's a missed opportunity.
Well, my understanding is that they're hands off. They don't intervene unless we're about to explode nukes to the point where it'll destroy the time-space continuum.
As a shaman who has always sought to use my ability to influence weather, which much of what I do is done by my allies rather than by me. And I claim some ETs who were claiming to be willing to help me. As a Iroquois, I am not necessarily bound by constraints of U.S. law. And if I, as a shaman, request aid, then I have invited them to help me. So they are not unilaterally intervening in human affairs, but they are doing as they have been requested. And I will tell you that I have met ET, and that I have been aboard a spaceship, and that I have had many experiences, at least 4, when I was with other people, so that I was not alone. Right? So I suppose the topic of this taboo topic is the military response to Roswell and the inside of Area 51. And even if Area 51 did not exist at the time of Roswell, it was probably Roswell that propelled its creation.
That actually sounds right to me, intuitively and historically.
Yeah. It does to me as well.
In my book, chapter 3 is about the Roswell crash. And there were several military personnel who saw things in transit, basically, saw things on pallets or in containers. And of course, most of these people are not around anymore. And I think, as the researchers in the book were saying, we're getting to a stage now, 70 years, 80 years after Roswell, where any first-hand witnesses are well gone. Second-hand, the next generation of witnesses are getting very, very, very old. And I have to tell you, when I wrote my book, which is all last century, it's so last century, because it goes from the end of World War II up through 1997, the Phoenix Lights. No. Some people have said, this is a great book, but what about some more recent cases that are more recent.
Mhm.
And, that's a fair criticism. But I wrote this book as for much the same reason, I think, as the writers of the book that Ian is bringing have had behind them as their motivation. In my book, I want to stitch together how a series of events in chronological order shaped public opinion about UFOs, and how government policy and procedure shaped public opinion about UFOs, and how today we're struggling with a public is struggling with a belief paradigm. Do you believe in UFOs? I don't believe in UFOs. I know my government knows they exist. That's quite a different dynamic, but that's not the discussion that we're having. And it's not the discussion that mass media ever presents. No, it really is taboo to think in those terms. And yet people are arriving at this information either from firsthand experience or from reading great books, such as Ian has brought, and so many others, by the way. There's so much great literature and so much work being done. It's incredible. It really is awesome. This is a great time to be alive for that. But it's concerning that the United States government appears to be in a position never to admit to UFOs. And now the craft exists. Oh, sure, we got UFO in terms of unidentified flying objects. We've got things that you've never seen before, talking about military technology being 20 to 100 years into the future from what we know. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the craft exists, but they're all from human inspiration. Well, I don't think so. In fact, I'm pretty sure no.
Yeah.
I'm very sure no. And the government is using modern technology as a smokescreen to once again and still cover up the truth that there are alien intelligences. And when we read these headlines about, we're going to find life on Mars, we're going to find life on this asteroid, this lifeless rock, life on a lifeless rock. What a great headline, right? What a great science fiction story. But the reality is they're talking microbes, and there's nothing wrong with microbes, but we're talking about living, breathing, I suppose they breathe, but living beings that have able intelligence to rival ours, if not surpass it, certainly in some areas. And we have many firsthand accounts of people saying, I worked alongside these people in laboratories, as a contractor, in engineering environments. And after a couple of days, you just got used to it.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I tell you that I have met ETs. So I don't have any doubt about it.
Exactly.
But who's going to believe me? I mean, I could maybe evidence that you join me. I might be able to get them to show themselves to you, but then who's going to believe you? So I think maybe a lot of it started out with we were in a religious-based culture that put humans as the only creation, and the public powers that be had to deal with that. And so they put truth out in a backhanded way by ridiculing. And slowly, drop by drop, we've gotten to a point where most people have an acceptance that there are ETs and that there are UFOs. But it is about as interesting to the average person as life in New Zealand. You might want to look at it now and then, but it's not that really relevant to you. Just hope the New Zealanders are doing okay and that they're not going to hurt them, right?
Yeah, it's not relevant until you wake up with an implant that you don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the funny things in the book, and this is, it's all evidence-based, and Gene, I know you, at least you and I, John Christos, I would assume you as well. We follow the path of the information. We follow the rabbit hole down and see where it goes, and we're not afraid to do so. And so in the book, it talks about, I know one of the things that came out of Roswell during the event, what they were talking about was the memory metal, right? Well, years and years later, I don't remember the exact details. I have to look them up again, but we've supposedly created our own memory metal. Now, it's not quite as robust and doesn't have quite the same properties as what they said was from the crash, but we've created that. Well, where did that come from? I mean, come on.
I'm hip. And for those in the audience who aren't familiar with memory metal, tell us what that is, Ian.
What memory metal is, it's basically metal that almost has the properties of, the best way I can describe it is a rubber band in paper form almost. It's usually really thin. And what happens is you can crumple it up like you would a piece of paper. You let it go and it pops out back to its original shape. You can't burn it. You can't tear it. Bullets will bounce off of it. It seems impervious to most things that I know, that I've read about, that we've tested it with. Nothing can penetrate it, but it has these properties. And so the one we've created, from what I understand, it has about the same tenacity as, say, titanium. So it's not completely proof like the stuff that came from the craft, but it's pretty close. And so they're trying to see what kind of things they can apply it to in modern society, whether it be aircraft, who knows what they're going to do with it. But it doesn't seem to be something in my mind that we could create on our own without help. And I'm not trying to put humanity down by any means, but that's pretty advanced stuff there.
Well, the fact that this memory metal, which, by the way, people who saw it or held it, and the son of a military guy got hold of some, his dad had brought some home and he was playing around with it. He wasn't supposed to have it, but he took it, and he and his gal pal were playing with it. And they would crumple this up in their hand and then extend their hand out, palm flat, and this thing would uncrumple by itself and go back to flat, its original conformity, its original shape. And they thought that was really nifty, but Ian, when we see today a substance that has these properties, historians, people like us who do research and know that this kind of material had been described in 1947, it does seem odd, right, or at least coincidental, that all of a sudden we now, 60 years, well, not all of a sudden, 60, 70 years later, researchers are admitting to having stuff with identical properties. And as you say, did we really dream this up ourselves, or was this more reverse engineering? And I've often wondered if my own dad weren't involved in reverse engineering, because he worked at an independent think tank. It's what he wanted to do after spending a year at the Pentagon working as a civilian contractor on building the 10 megaton nuclear bombs, which was a success. And he hated the military after that, would never go back. Nothing against the armed services. Thank you for serving. But it wasn't his cup of tea. And who knows what he saw there? I will never know. Although as a psychic, I'm trying to open these channels, but maybe he's still sworn to secrecy after death. What do I know? And my sense, though, is that if he were covering things up, it was to protect us, his family. And this is a prevailing theme that we get from Roswell and other crashes, where witnesses are threatened by the government. Do not talk, or bad things will happen to you and your family.
Well, the one thing I challenge skeptics with, not skeptics like us, but I'm talking about true skeptics that are more general mainstream, as I say, and one of the things that Gene and I go to MUFON sometimes here in St. Louis, and I know Debbie Ziegelmeyer has talked about, who's the MUFON state director now, has talked about they went out to Roswell to do some digging. This is not more than 10 years ago, I think. And they were followed around by government types, and there was weird things happening with what if nothing had happened there besides a freaking weather balloon? Why would the government care about it at all 60, 70 years later? Why would they care? They would just let it go. By now, I'm sure whatever weather balloon technology they had in 1947 is far surpassed by what we have now. So why would they care?
The reason that Roswell is chapter 3 in my book, Unknown Objects, the top 10 US UFO cases, which is, by the way, available on Amazon, is because here was a first case of, first of all, military admission that there had been a UFO crash. This happened first. Military sent out a press release, basically, and some press outlets picked up on this, and the Roswell Reporter ran the story. That the news came in, I'm thinking around sunset, around evening time the night before. The following morning, it's on the front page of the Roswell Record, is the name of the Roswell Record. And then the next day after that, we've got military brass holding up the remains of an actual weather balloon saying, oh, we were wrong. It wasn't a UFO. We've identified it now, and here is what it was. But anyone who had been on the scene and picked up the metal that you talked about, the memory metal, for example, there are reports that people saw dead ETs and that they were autopsied, and that people saw that, and that nurses and other staff who attended these clandestine operations disappeared. They disappeared. Their military records disappeared. How do you fight a force like that with the power to make people just disappear? And as a skeptic, okay, they disappeared. Did they ever exist? Well, I wasn't there. I don't know for sure, but other people who were there are pretty sure that they were disappeared.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what the government even now will do to keep those secrets. It's not something that most of us would willingly subscribe to if we had a choice. Let's put it that way.
I think it's really important to study history to understand the present. I didn't believe it when I was younger and I had to take history in school, but now I'm glad that I did take those classes and actually paid a bit of attention. But it's never too late to learn more history. It's never too late to learn more of anything and take an interest in the world. But what our government is counting on, and what so far has apparently been the case, is that most people are so busy just making a living that they really don't have interest in the topic, just as I have no interest particularly in scrapbooking. Doesn't mean I would want to close down all the stores that provide scrapbook materials or bust up all the scrapbooking parties. No, it's just that if a person is trying to talk to me about scrapbooking, my eyes are likely to glaze over. And when I talk to people about UFOs, sometimes their eyes glaze over. I get it. But I think it's very important to understand that chronologically in U.S. history, we had significant UFO crashes covered up by our government, and that within 10, 15 years, we have presidents saying, beware the rise of the military-industrial complex, beware secret societies, and then a bunch of assassinations of peaceniks, leaders who were into peace, and musicians into peace. And then a series of events that finally led to 9/11/2001 and the current war on terror, which everybody takes for granted as, oh yeah, well, there's this war on terror now, just like they took for granted we had this war on drugs. That didn't work. We had a war on no education, no child left behind. That didn't work really well. We have had wars on poverty. That really didn't work very well. We still have poverty. You know what I'm saying? We have improvement. I don't want to be a total naysayer and a negativist, but the fact is that it just ain't happening. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember being one of the few people back in 2001, 2002, where, you know, here comes the Patriot Act. I'm telling people, you don't want this. You don't want this Patriot Act. I understand we need to take measures against these terrorists. I understand that. Although, don't get me started about 9/11 and the truth of that. But anyway.
Could do a whole show on 9/11, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a series.
Exactly. But, you know, look, it was a eroding of our freedoms, and then you have more erosion, and it's all, you know, it's all intertwined. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I have to agree, and I don't mind talking about Patriot Act a bit. What's really clever about it is how, and many people are completely oblivious to this, very significant parts of the Patriot Act have everything to do with money and the flow of money and the restriction of the flow of money and this move toward the cashless society. And speaking of taboo topics, cashless society is something you don't hear much about, but a guy who said he was former CIA told me in the 1970s when we were street people, basically hippie types. He was on the streets of Berkeley, California, living the good life that way. And he said, I left the CIA after I found out what they're up to. And one of the things they're up to is moving us toward this cashless society. Well, at the time, in the 1970s, there were still lots of people using cash. Cash was common currency. There were large denomination bills. Lots of things were purchased with cash. When you look at older movies and notice how people act in stores, people use cash. Credit cards really didn't get going until the 80s, maybe. And then they went with a vengeance, okay? But this self-described, self-professed former CIA agent said, he described it, he step by step, how the government would get people used to using credit, which is actually debt, okay? Use credit cards, have rolling debt all the time, stay perpetually in debt, never be able to get ahead. And then ultimately, with cashless society, the government can single people out as persons of interest and shut off their credit. So all of a sudden, you can't buy or sell anything. Now with the microchip, getting back to the Lear implants and such, and pets and children and employees, with those, you can, Command Central can turn off the credit, can turn off your access to an office building, can turn off access to your computer, can render you helpless. And we're seeing some of this already in places like communist China, which have gone really high tech. China has gone extremely high tech. We don't hear much about it, but I write about it all the time. China's high tech. They have brilliant scientists doing things commanded by the Communist Party. They have basically unlimited resources, and they are inventing to beat the band. And they are using high technology to control the masses through tried and true methods like public shaming. Okay, so there's a city in China where a facial recognition technology was being tested that projects jaywalkers up on a huge screen like you'd see in Times Square in New York City. Huge screen, digitalized, and it's showing the ID of this jaywalker and flashing, this is an undesirable person. This person doesn't love the community. This person is jaywalking. Shame, shame. And of course, China has a social credit score where anything that you do is logged as a transaction, for better or for worse. So when you jaywalk, that's a ding. That's a bad thing. If you volunteer at the animal shelter, that might be a good thing. And they keep score. And I've heard murmurings that the United States or certain companies in the United States are moving toward that. In fact, Facebook, I think it was, is having some sort of social credit or approval rating. And of course, they're famous for muzzling content.
It's funny because there's this falls right into an episode I watched of the show, The Orville, which is really funny. If you're into Star Trek at all, it's very funny. 1 second.
Well, we can't have any dead air. So if you just tuned in, welcome to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, broadcast on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network and online at Taboo Topics with Jean Broida YouTube channel, and also at tabootopics.life/shows. We meet and greet and talk about taboo topics every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. Tonight, I am so blessed to have as my guests Walt Christos and Ian Hack. We are tearing apart the Roswell crash. Back to you, Ian.
Yeah, I was going to say, an episode of The Orville, which is a really good show. It's really funny. They went to a planet where everything was based on this social credit score for these people. So if you did something bad, you could end up in jail or worse. It wasn't necessarily a crime like we would think of, like somebody, for example, doesn't open the door for somebody that's behind them. Bad, and everything's completely monitored. It's like the Orwellian idea on steroids almost. I mean, it was crazy, this episode. And, you know, a couple of the crew got in trouble because they had to make these fake things to do their credit, their scores or whatever, and they did some things, and it's crazy, this episode. And I would recommend it for people.
And what show? I'm sorry, what show?
The Orville.
Because it sounds like an episode from Dark Mirror, which, I mean, a lot of these shows are exploring these same themes.
Yeah, but it's from the Orville. I don't remember the episode or what season it was in or any of that, but
yeah,
it was pretty crazy. For anyone that's interested in these social credit score things, I think it's, a lot of times these shows are meant as a warning,
Yes.
Don't want to do this.
Hey, let's move on to another article with Walt. Christos, take us away on another taboo topic, sir.
All right. Well, I just wanted to say nobody asked about Roswell, why there would be test dummies on weather balloons, because that's what they use to explain the ET body. But weather balloons generally are just balloons, and they would not have a test dummy. But nobody's ever asked that.
Good
All
point.
right.
Actually, I think some people have, but we'll
yeah.
we'll give it to you. Go
All right.
ahead.
I went with an article called "Do You Know Your Ghost?" which was chaired by Chad Stombaugh of the 11th Hour Paranormal Research Society. And I picked this article because the main focus of today's paranormal group seems to be upon ghosts. And they used to be taboo and ridiculed, sort of like ETs, but a lot of the people in the paranormal world today are focused on them. So Chad wrote, he named types of ghosts and what they are. First, he said, there are residuals, can best be compared to a video image being played over and over, often associated with an anniversary of an event and non-interacting with the environment. May be auditory or visual in nature, like sounds of cannons or guns or figures lasting briefly. Then there's the intelligent ghost, and they attempt to communicate via noises, electronics, often try to get attention and seem aware of their current environment, may manifest a physical appearance and be responsive in EVPs, ITC, or other forms or attempts at spirit communication, things that can be scientifically monitored. Then there's the poltergeist, our famous one, generated by the emotional turmoil or stress of late adolescent to teenage individuals, known for creating noises, throwing objects, and in a few cases, starting fire. There's also the shadow figure, and they appear as solid, dark figures. They may or may not be a type of ghost, but known to be in haunted locations. In fact, it is the presence of a poltergeist or objects moving around that makes a location defined as haunted. Considered by some to be interdimensional beings or demons, often seen at night in a capacity similar to tales of the old hag, possibly indicating a byproduct of sleep paralysis or oxygen deprivation. The demonic, often the source of negative haunting, do not like humans and have never possessed solid form, capable of throwing objects, attacking and possessing individuals, may appear as a person with missing features, as they are not capable of taking full human form, best to be avoided. Then the elemental, largely anecdotal and folklore-based, nature-based entity that has never held corporeal form or never was human, can become trapped at a location causing activity, often found near forests, lakes, mountains, etc. Believed to be 4 different varieties: gnomes, undies, which are water nymphs, salamanders, and sylphs, which are air spirits. Now, to me, a residual is a recording left by an imprint upon an environment, usually by a living being. I once lived in a place where every day at the same time, there would come a loud knock on my wooden front gate, then a loud knock on my front door, and then a loud knock on my refrigerator. It was at the same time every day, and it was a loud knock, all right? But there was absolutely nothing there. This could have been a harmless residual produced by a repetition of the same thing in someone's daily routine that is done often enough to leave an imprint, where I think residuals are most likely in places of murder and mayhem, where there's been a strong emotion, and that emotion goes out and it gets captured by the environment. And I think that some of those places can attract beings that feed on those vibrations. Okay. To me, an intelligent or sentient is something that is able to think. Why do ghosts wear clothes? I think the clothing did not die, and it was already dead. And I think this indicates some ability of a ghost to control or influence its own appearance, which also indicates sentience. Now, according to the ghost hunters of Tennessee, poltergeists are ghosts that are emotionally stressed, and they make strange noises and knocking sounds. They move items, slam doors, and smash things on the ground. And usually the disturbances last for 2 to 6 weeks. Some people believe poltergeists are caused by the subconscious, or a reflection of a human ability that is not being controlled. To me, poltergeist is anything that can move objects with or without being seen. Most poltergeists seem to be angry that this might not always be the case. But when it is the case, it could be a residual. And with stealth technology and or telekinetic individuals and or technology, not everything that can move objects might be a ghost. I am uncertain if sometimes the residual, like knocking on my front door, might be if a poltergeist might be a residual manifestation. Right, now to me, a shadow figure is one that appears to be dark in color rather than appearing to be light in color. I think shadow figures are seen as darkness in darkness. In other words, if you are in a dark room, you might then notice a shadow figure because it is darker than the dark room, and that tends to make it stand out. I don't know if that might imply a technology of some sort that responds to light, and that the light helps to make it invisible. We are so used to thinking in terms of what we can't see in the dark that we forget that there are things that can't be seen in the light. I assume that while some beings are comfortable living in light, that others might be comfortable in darkness and might actually have something to do with their natural range of vibration. I personally have experienced shadow figures, but have only felt uncomfortable or threatened one time around them, where most people tend to view shadow figures as evil, or they feel fear or threatened by them. And I don't think that's always the case. As a youth, I had a being, perhaps a guardian, whom I named Hiram. I always could feel when he was around me, kind of thing. And there was a time when I was in a second floor room with many friends, and what I assumed to be his humanoid silhouette appeared outside my window, like it was standing in midair, just remaining stationary outside a second floor window, so no contact with ground or any visible platform. It was just like looking into my room. And thankfully, I was able to point this figure out to the 4 friends of mine who were in the room with me at the time. So again, I've had so many strange experiences in my life that I'm just grateful when I have someone with me to witness. Right? And I did that. Now, to me, traditionally, demonic has been that which is associated with Lucifer, Satan, or fallen angels. As a shaman, I have viewed these as simply other life forms. I have traditionally viewed ghosts as afterlife human spirits, and must think that something that has never been human would not be a ghost. So if it is demonic, I wouldn't think it's a ghost. Anyway, but the article did classify them as a type of ghost. Or I would agree it's something that people who are investigating the paranormal might run into. I don't know what kind of limitation it might have that would cause it to fail to be able to fully assume a human form. I would not assume that it could not do so, but this article does say that they can. Also, I know that there are many types of life forms out there. I know that there are many different types of animals that have horns, so that everything with horns is not necessarily a cow or demonic. I do disagree with those who would paint with a wide brush, which is to see all of a group in the same way. And I think that some people make that kind of a wide brush error when they say anything other than human or Michael aligned is demonic. Right? So there is that other extreme, which, and they would define all forms of ghosts as demons of one sort or another. And I would disagree with those. And some people, when they feel self-righteous, might think it's okay to be hateful or harmful to others. And I would disagree with that. And I would be very leery of the label of demonic. Now, to me, traditionally, elementals are not ghosts. They're their own life form. And I have found them associated in magic with earth, air, fire, and water. I have called these of them being of the many, and meaning normally native to our planet, though perhaps normally resident in an adjacent dimension or reality. I would include within the many fairies, dwarves, elves, and gens, though I suspect some, like gods and elves, might be ETs, native to our reality, but originally from a different planet. I think there might be a factor called thought forms, which can occur when a single strong-willed individual or many people sharing a thought can manifest things from their mind or minds into our matrix or our common shared physical reality. I have wondered if some UFOs might be thought, not all, but some. And I have wondered if when a movie is seen by many, many people, especially a disaster movie, if psychics might then pick up that from the mass human consciousness and believe it to be a premonition, when what they are actually getting is all these people thinking the same thought at the same time, which can then produce a manifestation in our reality. Overall, I think much has been done during the past 2 decades, during the 21st century, to evidence the existence of things other than physical human beings. The interpretations of that evidence do vary, and obviously more research needs to be done and is being done. I have said people seem to perceive many different things, and this can be because the ranges of individual human perception can be different. So that 2 people might experience the same thing in different ways due to variations in their tools of perception and resonant symbolism. I have joked that there are many different animals in the jungle, and some might fear humans, while others might lack any fear of humans, and some might view humans as food. I think one mistake some amateur paranormal investigators might make is to be too casual about what they are doing. And some might assume there is nothing there, so no cause for alarm, and it's all fun and games, so they can do as they please and be falsely sensationalist or overly casual. And I think some have experienced harm from doing that. It can be best to have an experienced guide while exploring something that is unknown to you, and to seek to have the company at least of a buddy system, simply because one might never know when one might be facing something that is too much for one to handle. I have joked that as a shaman who influences weather, sets atmospheres, I am sometimes long-winded. Thank you for putting up with me. Onward with a smile. Ta-da!
That's a lot to wrap a head around. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of experience with a lot of that stuff, both with my wife and then with our ghost hunting or spirit. I don't want to say ghost hunting, our paranormal knowledge seeking group, the Eastern Missouri Paranormal Society. And I have a story to share that kind of ties Roswell and not necessarily microchips, but with spirit, which I think you both are probably familiar, and I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers are familiar with Jim Mars, rest in peace. He told a story once, and it's in a video somewhere on YouTube, of he was with a paranormal investigation group that did an investigation of a building that stood where the former Roswell Hospital was back in 47. It had been changed to something else when they did their investigation, but it was still the same property. And he says he experienced what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, he saw ghosts of the Greys. He saw manifestations of some of the Greys floating through the halls in this building, and they actually communicated with him. And it's a pretty interesting story. So I just wanted to mention that, kind of tied in. But yeah, I agree with a lot of the stuff that was in that he mentioned in the article. I would have to say the realm of spirit and the realm of what happens to our energy after we're done with these bodies is more of a mystery even than the ET mystery, because it's something that's more tied to a lot of metaphysical stuff, more tied to, there's so much to it, and we're still striving to understand it. And I'd say our understanding is in its infancy, and even beyond that, the acceptance that it's possible is even kind of fighting against that knowledge. I mean, there's people that say, what do you mean ghosts exist? There's no such thing, So until we get beyond that, gaining true knowledge is going to be a struggle, but I'm glad that we all are interested in it.
Indeed so. And while I have limited experience with ghosts, the first thing I was going to say is, based on anecdotal evidence, it would seem that there's a lot more ghosts than ETs. And that would make sense if ghosts are residuals, as the article called some of these. And think of all the people who've lived and died, and if some portion of them end up as ghosts, my understanding is that ghosts happen when the deceased isn't quite ready to leave the earth plane, believes they have unfinished business, or they were essentially thrust into the afterlife suddenly without not a lot of people die suddenly without warning, and they don't end up being ghosts. But there seem to be certain elements common to all ghost stories, if you will, ghost accounts. I don't mean ghost story like, oh, it's just a fable. I mean people's accounts of what they experienced when they were haunted, or when they went to somewhere haunted, this sort of thing. Like you, Walt, I have a metaphysical background. In my case, shamanism as Wicca, Western magic, white magic, and witchcraft. So observing full moons and solar events, solstices and equinoxes is what I'm trying to spit out there. And I was able to communicate with many elementals. That's what we did as Wiccans: earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. 5 elements, actually, the 4 terrestrial elements, with spirit over them all. And spirit being part of everything, basically, that we know. I did want to, you were very kind to give me this article ahead of time. I appreciate that, Walt. And I just wanted to say that there was a typo in there. They talked about one of the elementals as being an undie. It's not an undie, it's an undine. These are the type of water elemental. I particularly vibrate to gnomes, earth elementals, and I enjoy casting about for shiny rocks, that sort of thing. I've been to the Coleman mines in Arkansas many moons ago, when they were open to the public and the public could go out and root through the tailings. This is where big earth moving machines take out quartz crystal and push the rest up to the top of the pit or the hole. And tourists could go around with their little buckets or whatever and look for crystals. And I love that sort of thing. Take me out rock hunting. I adore that. I also have relatives now deceased who were big time rock hounds, put it to you that way. But the advantage of elementals in psychicism as a shaman or as a witch is that they know things and they can do things that humans don't know and can't do. And from my perspective, they're very utilitarian beings. They're not completely reliable, but they are faithful, which is kind of ironic. Once you become friendly with an elemental, they are likely to help you out until you irritate them. And you don't want to do that. What about you, Walt? Any direct experience with elementals?
Yeah, I would think so. As far as a shaman goes, I would count them among my allies. I want to thank you on the undies, because that's how it was in the original article, and I went with it. And generally, when I think of undies, I don't think of a water spirit, but it's undine. So I did not know better until you mentioned it now. I went with the way it was written.
Yeah, it's a word we don't hear much anymore, unfortunately. But I had an undine friend.
Yeah.
I have an undine friend.
I view all my allies as friends. I never compel, I request. In the ancient Greeks, they had the 5 groups, but for them, the 5th was ether, which I have viewed as part of the quantum soup. And I think that is where metaphysics is going to blend with physics when we start understanding them. On the gray ghost at Roswell, I used to joke that the biblical return of the dead might be the ETs wanting their dead back. Because if you had someone who was advanced enough, if a human spaceship astronaut landed on a different planet and the people there shot and killed them and then cut up the body, we might wonder later on if that might have some repercussions. So I've wondered if they might want their dead back at some point in time. There is an excellent movie called Ghosts of Mars. And it's when we finally get it together to start colonizing Mars, and the spirits of the sentient beings that used to live on Mars start causing problems for the humans who have gone there. It's just an interesting side digression that hit my mind off of ETs have ghosts too.
Well, that's the second new concept I've gotten in this show, brand new. ETs having ghosts. That's a bit of a mind blower, but I was going to say it stands to reason. And then I was thinking the skeptical part of me is like, none of this is reasonable, you know? And that's the beauty of magic and mysticism. It doesn't have to be reasonable to be true. All right. To be something that you experience. That's something a lot of modern Americans don't get at all. They're never exposed to it. And they just clench. They can't handle. They've been trained and taught, and it's been pounded into their head. There's no such thing as UFOs. There's no such thing as ESP. There's no such thing as magic. If you can't test it in a laboratory, it doesn't exist or it isn't true. And it's a lot to overcome. It's a lot of prejudice to overcome.
It's rooted in the concrete with all 4 feet. Right?
Well, I agree, but a lot of people don't. And I don't have to be right. I certainly don't preach. I believe what I believe. It resonates with me. Other people do the same. It's when people want to force their viewpoints on me or anyone else that I start to balk. Because what right do you have to impress your opinions on me? None.
Mm-hmm. We can share.
Exactly. Sharing is caring.
Yeah, it can be.
Ian, we stepped all over you. What were you going to say there?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. It's you know, it's what I would tell anybody, you know, that wanted to get into any of these subjects. I'd be like, before you even start, 2 things. One, imagine the most uncomfortable moment in your entire life. Are you prepared for that to happen not just once again, but repeatedly again while you go down this path? That's one thing I would say to them. 2, are you prepared to leave behind all your knowledge, to have an open mind, and you can admit to being either taught something wrong or that you yourself is wrong about something before you even start down this path.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, let me ask you this, Ian. Do you have experience with ghosts, with elementals? Loaded question.
I do. The first one I remember, once again, this is after I met my wonderful wife. We were living in Arnold, Missouri, kind of Fenton, Arnold area. And I had a townhouse. And I'd been living there a year or 2, whatever, nothing. And of course, I don't remember if this was when she visited or after she had moved in. I think it was after she had moved in. We discovered we had a visitor that had been, it was a regular visitor, not just my townhouse, but on the whole block of townhouses, a visitor by the name of Mitch. And I had the pants scared off of me, not literally, but figuratively. I was sitting in a chair on my desktop computer. I don't even remember what I was doing at the time, something on the computer, obviously. And I had heard something whispered in my ear. I must have jumped 10 feet, you know, and there was nothing there. And it was just this Mitch spirit trying to communicate with me. And he wasn't really malevolent in any way, but yeah, I definitely have experience, yes.
Well, what do you think of this article? Is this merely expressing a need to categorize, or is there some use out of these kinds of distinctions?
I think there can be a use, but we as humans, what we tend to do is, and I don't know the why, but we tend to want to categorize everything. We want to put everything in a jar. We want to put everything in its own little space, in its own little box, its own file in a filing cabinet. Not everything in existence in the multiverse can be categorized that way. So we got to be careful labeling things. Now, on the other hand, we have to have some way to understand it and discuss it. So we have to have some kind of term or some definition for it, at least, for us to relate about it. But I tend to think that my knowledge and most humans' knowledge when it comes to the spiritual world is very small. And I would never deign to try to tell a spirit or, God forbid, a demonic entity or anything else what they are. They know what they are, and they can communicate that to me. I will say to them, I need to call you this to be able to relate to other human beings about you, but I would never, if I was communicating with a spirit, say, oh, I know what you are. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, that's a very excellent observation, in my opinion. And in case you've just tuned in, we're in the final stretch of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. It's the March 15th show. I have with me Walt Christos and Ian Hack, superior guest panelists. I'm Jean Broida. Let's take a few moments just to do our shout outs. Ian, how can people contact you and what are you up to?
Well, what I'm up to is I'm hoping soon that the thing I mentioned before, our the Eastern Missouri Paranormal Society should ramp up with the weather getting a little bit better. I don't know how the coronavirus is going to affect us, but we're hopefully going to start doing some investigation soon of who knows what kind of activity. And then, of course, you can always reach me at my Facebook group, which is St. Louis Lightworkers for Truth and Disclosure, and Ian Hack on Facebook. If you want to message me, hey, I'll be glad to talk to you about whatever.
Awesome. Do you like people to email you or you prefer to go through these pages?
Through the Facebook, I think it'd be better. I like to keep my email a little bit more private.
No, I get that. How about you, Walt?
People can contact me they can find me by searching for Walt, which is Jualt. They can contact me at walt@aol.com. My current project is writing another book, the third in a series called A Forum, Forum, with no name. And that was a metaphysics forum that I conducted between 1997 and 2010. And it's like a time capsule. And I think a lot of the material in it is timeless. And writing a book like that could have taken me 4 or 5 months maybe. And so that's going to consume my time. And that's what I'll be doing. Basically, I'm retired and I'm taking it easy. And I am enjoying my twilight years.
More power to you, brother, on that one.
Amen and aum to that.
Yeah.
And I'm your host, or your hostess with the mostest, if you prefer. I like the ring of that. I'm Jean Broida. You can find me online at my website, www.lightwork111.com. That's a reference to my nom de plume, the pseudonym that I write under for the dailyconspiracy.com and survival.update, Lightworker111. Please email me, Jean, Jean, at lightwork111.com. Please visit my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Click subscribe, and if you click the little bell, you'll get alerts when we go live with broadcasts. I want to shout out and thank Global Enlightenment Radio Network, one of the best paranormal networks on Conspiracy Street, and the great help we're getting promoting this brand new show of mine online. It's a hoot and a half, I'll tell you that. We've had some excellent panelists, and it just blows my mind the kinds of things that people are getting into. I write daily stories for the dailyconspiracy.com and survival.update on a whole variety of topics, but my favorite is UFOs far and away. It is the biggest conspiracy as far as I'm concerned, the biggest lie that encompasses so many other lies. And I invite you to check out my Amazon book, Unknown Objects, the Top 10 U.S. UFO Cases. It's a free read with Kindle Unlimited. And if you read that book, you will know why you must be crazy not to believe in UFOs. Having said all of this, we have a few more minutes. Any last thoughts, anybody?
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so grateful that you're here. I say it every show. A show like this simply is not possible without exceptional and brilliant guests such as yourself bringing articles of interest to Paranormal and Conspiracy Streets. That's where we meet on the corner there every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Ian, final thoughts.
Well, I would say thank you for having me for sure. It was really a pleasure to be on your program. I would say anyone in the St. Louis or surrounding area, if you have a need for any kind of investigation take place, no matter what it is, if it's what people would consider paranormal, I'm not going to come investigate, say, your plumbing. But if you need something, please get a hold of us, and Temps will be more than happy to arrange something to, at no charge, I might add, to investigate any issues you may be having. Other than that, just peace and love. Have that love vibration. Love your fellow man, especially with this coronavirus coming around and affecting everybody's lives. I think it's very important for all of us just to be kind to each other, be nice to each other. People have enough to worry about without you or anyone else being rude to someone else for no reason. So just be nice to one another.
Well, hear, and well said there. And thanks one last time to my excellent guests, Walt Christos and Ian Hack. That is our take on it, ladies and gentlemen, and others in the audience out there. Thank you, everyone, for listening in to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida at tabootopics.life/shows on YouTube, the Taboo Topics with Jean Broida channel. And I will see you next week with a new panel of superior, out-of-this-world guests. For now, over and out.
That one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seen